Welcome to Flow with Arman Asadi. Where do I begin? I'll just say his name. Francis Pedraza. Thank you. I absolutely love every single episode I have done on this show so far, but man, oh man, it's hard to pick a favorite. As I say to Francis in the episode, it's like each episode is like one of your children. It's hard to choose a favorite, but this one was just absolutely incredible. Francis is a genius. He's absolutely brilliant. He's extremely passionate. And this is a very, very important conversation. And the concepts that are shared are extremely enlightening and are shared in a way by Francis that, I don't know if inspired is the right word. I am definitely inspired, but more so by the conviction, the truth, and the beauty in which he speaks and shares and expresses not just what he knows, but what he believes. And I ask you to kick back, enjoy this conversation, and pay attention to the details. I mean, look, one of the things I do when I'm listening to podcasts is when I uncover somebody like this, like I rewind a lot. Like I sit back and I'm like, whoa, I need to hear that again. And I re-listen to certain points and certain references because it's important to absorb a lot of what he's saying, especially people like Francis. So I think the best way is to just let it rip and let you right into this incredible conversation. I will say a couple things about Francis. Francis is the founder and CEO of Invisible Technologies, a groundbreaking company. You should definitely check it out. We talk about it a little bit during the show and what the vision of this company really is. And I actually just found out, I was looking this up about Francis. He actually used to be the CEO of Everest, an app that I used to use and loved. So that's super cool. I thought that was one of the most innovative apps that I've used in a long time. It was all about goal setting and journaling. And I actually just recently, ironically, the other day, after the app closed, I had downloaded my files and I opened my journal from the Everest days when I was using it. So anyway, I thought that was really ironic. But this conversation is just enjoy. Kick back, enjoy. One other note. How do I know Francis? So Francis and I met. So there's a group called Summit that I've mentioned before on another episode, Summit Series. My favorite event that they do is the Tulum one. This is basically an event a few times a year of creatives, entrepreneurs, visionaries, incredible people. And I was hanging out with my good friend, Jason Silva, who I can't wait to have on the show, but I'm reserving for an in-person interview so we can also record video and go real deep down the rabbit hole. Anyway, I was hanging out with Jason. Francis approached and just started going down the rabbit hole with Jason and I, and it was awesome. And we kept in touch, and I watched him build Invisible into what it is today, and I recently reached out to him to get on the show. So that's that. Here it is, my conversation with Francis Pedraza. What has been the perspective that he's providing that's provided any level of comfort whatsoever? Because I feel you have your own brilliant perspectives, man, which I'm excited to dig into.
I'm flattered. I think sanity is a network effect, right? And so part of the reason our world is so tribal is that people need other people who agree with them in order to feel sane. And so if you end up coming to having a hypothesis or having a strong opinion that is really divergent from the group, it's like you feel increasingly gaslit. You feel increasingly insane. And
you also feel like you're just walking alone in the desert. Yeah. So you're just seeking an oasis of people, at least one person, right?
Yes. Yes. So in the very beginning of this whole thing in early March, I felt like this one voice that was saying something. And he didn't have an opinion yet, but he was.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking and back channeling and going through it together.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like therapy. It was like, wow, at least somebody is on this journey with me who's asking the same questions and questioning things, and wasn't just buying, the group narrative, hook, line, and sinker.
Mm-hmm.
And Jason and I are different in so many ways. Like, I'm sure there are many, many things that we disagree on, but he's very tolerant. Like, he's very comfortable with reasonable disagreement.
Extremely.
And
well, this is a sign of intellect and openness,
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was a gift for me,
How did you formulate your opinion, Francis, so early, and what were the factors that formulated it?
Great question. So first of all, there's a book on my bookshelf. I'll show you.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about your art too. You got some cool shit back there.
So here's a book that has hit me time and again, kind of just when I needed it. The first time, so Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo. Have you read it?
I did when I was in high school. So it's been a while, man.
Yeah. So sometimes you're not ready for a book when it gets
right.
You're like perfectly ripe, like fertile soil.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So when I first read this, I was kind of in the wilderness, metaphorically speaking. My first startup had failed. I'd taken time off and I'd gone through sort of a Phoenix metaphor. My second startup had like risen like a rocket ship, then crashed. And I again fled San Francisco, couldn't afford the city, was staying with my grandparents in their ranch in the middle of nowhere. Like the nearest bar was like 100 miles away. And I like brought all these books from home and had them there, and I had my laptop and I was working away, and it was pretty bleak. It was very unlikely that the startup would survive. But yet I wasn't ready to quit. And I read this book, and this book, one of the main messages in this book is about expression. Express yourself. As a matter of fact, it'll be easier.
I forgot that. You're right.
It'll be easier for me to find this because one of my best friends, Edward, just quoted this in a beautiful blog post. The title of which is "Alienated Majesty," and that is actually a phrase from Emerson. And here it is. A man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmament of bards and sages. Yet he dismisses without notice his thought, because it is his. In every work of genius, we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with a certain alienated majesty. And my friend Edward goes on to say, let me see if I can find his line. Yes. This teaches you the valuable lesson that if you don't say or do it, someone else will. Right?
Oh.
And I was having thoughts. They were hypotheses, really, but they
fleeting, typically things that have always been there, passing by. Yeah.
So and I was saying I said them, and then I believe in like thinking out loud in public. So I was building a set of thoughts that were connected and observations that fit this model, and that was different than the normal model. And it turned out to be validated. I wouldn't say it's like 100% right. I've been wrong on something, and I can tell you what I was wrong on and what I was right on. But I think substantially right, way more right than the official model,
than the official narrative. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes when you have a strong intuition, you don't actually know why, and you have to unpack it. And it might take you a long time to figure out why you're so sure. Now you have to fight your confirmation bias. And
Yes.
so that's actually one of the main things I talked to Jason about. Is like,
Yeah.
I think that they've got confirmation bias, but they think that I've got confirmation
Of
bias.
course.
We are saying the opposite things. The law of non-contradiction in logic says if A
Yes.
equals B and A does not equal B, they cannot both be true.
Mhm.
So something's got to give.
Yeah, but it sounds like you are also tolerant while still standing firm where you believe to have understood something or have a strong sense of intuition. And what you're saying is that reading this book and further going through that process that you went through after that second startup, did it just ignite something in you where you felt that you had to express and speak and display that in a public manner?
It did. One of the books I read in that time was the Book of the Samurai,
Mm-hmm.
Agakure. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that it says in the book is one must become insane and desperate to die. 10 men cannot stand against such a man. So there is a principle of action, of exploit, of
Mm-hmm.
adventure, which is a an incredible fearlessness and
Mm-hmm.
aggression, really, um,
Yeah.
that is effective. And that is, you might say, a principle, right? We can look at it sort of objectively and abstractly and see that, like, a Viking berserker or a Japanese samurai is going to overpower someone who is just like a mercenary and doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that is a principle of action, but then there are other principles of thought that need to be counterbalanced with it. And there is I think that many intellectuals fall victim to uncertainty because the
Mm.
process of seeking truth ends up drowning you in complexity and ambiguity and nuance.
Yes.
So Yeats has a line in his poem "The Second Coming," which is the best lack all conviction, but the worst are full of passionate intensity. Um,
Seen a lot of that today.
yeah,
Oh,
so I actually am full of passionate intensity. So either that means I'm
yeah.
thirst,
Yeah.
or maybe I like to think that there's some of the best who are comfortable taking strong positions, and sort of strong positions
It's rare.
loosely. Yeah.
Here's what I'll say on this topic of taking a position, having a strong opinion, and being honest, especially in a public setting. There's one thing to do that with a friend, one-on-one, in a text message, over a glass of wine, whatever it might be, in a small group. It's another to have the courage to speak that or write that publicly. And I don't think I know a lot. I don't know what your aim is with something like that, but I know that most people that do don't necessarily have an aim. I always think about what Flannery O'Connor said. She said, "I write to discover what I know."
Mm.
And not only is that accurate for me, but also the process of speaking to discover what I know, a derivative of that. And you said that very similar concept in that you are taking a concept in real time based on a combination of intuition, information, data, and formulating an opinion.
Yeah.
What I find absolutely terrifying about that is doing it the way that you have learned and come to do it, which is really courageous. Look, man, like, I have these thoughts and opinions too, and whatever I express is already a lot for me. And so my question to you is, in 2020, in the midst of all this chaos, how do you do that? Because I think I'm going to tell you something you're going to find really funny.
Please.
I was starting this podcast and building my guest list and just talking to different people who would be good, who's in my network, blah blah blah. And I'm not going to name the name because you're just going to find it funny anyway, regardless of who it was. And they go, "Do you know Francis?" And I say, "Yeah, I met him before." And they go, "Okay, yeah, he'd be good. He's pretty controversial though, man." So you literally have been labeled controversial.
I am controversial.
Tell me why. And do you do it? Do you do it intentionally?
Um, it's more of a byproduct, but an inevitable byproduct, and one that I embrace. Your line of questioning is driving at a set of truths that I'm going to try to express in one go. So allow me to rant for a minute.
Please. Yeah, I love your rants.
I'm finish taking a note here because I want to make sure I get these thoughts out. Okay. So I love the quote you said. I write to discover what I know. It reminded me of William Blake's line, "A fool who persists in his folly will become wise." And the ancient Greeks made a religion of drama. Like the Homeric religion was dramatic in the sense that the warriors would thank their enemies for giving them a stage to express themselves on. If there wasn't the drama of conflict, they wouldn't have an opportunity for courage. And this extended even into romantic morality. Helen tells Telemachus the story of how she was seduced by Paris to cheat on her husband Menelaus. And Menelaus hears the whole story, and everyone applauds her for responding to Aphrodite, to responding to lust, because lust was manifesting in the moment. Very different than Judeo-Christian morality. The idea is that, like, when you are inflamed by anger, when you are aroused by lust, that there's a certain morality that comes from fully living those out. That, like, instead of emotions being these phenomenon that occur inside of us that are chemical, they're actually the gods moving around, and we're just being responsive to the gods. Totally different. There's a really great book called All Things Shining that uncovers this territory, but the sort of source material is in Heidegger. And Nietzsche to some extent. Nietzsche had this idea of amor fati, the love of your fate. So what is it that creates a tragic hero? In the ancient Greek tragedies and dramas, it was someone who was sort of responding to the Emersonian light within them that led them down a course of action that resulted in sort of an inevitable tragedy, right? And so it wasn't necessarily like, oh, I made a mistake and therefore I died. It was, oh, I fully lived out I fully followed my muses, and therefore I died. And that's
following my muse. Yep.
Creates the denouement, the drama and catharsis of the plot. Another sort of ancient Greek, opposition is in ethos versus telos. So the modern Western mind is very teleological. That is, we have a goal, an objective, a metric, and we're like, how do we achieve that thing? And so when a lot of people ask me about, my expressionism. They say, well, what are you trying to accomplish? Who's your audience? Is this actually working? What about the costs? And I could engage in a teleological, or utilitarian kind of analysis about, like, whether or not this is net beneficial or not. Actually, that's not you yourself said, like, so the people that that express themselves the most don't even engage in the cost benefit analysis. It's more like a way of life. It's a way, and a way is an ethic. It's an ethos. And you might think of our society this way. So why are we a democracy? If it could be demonstrated that a technocracy, a group of experts, could rule over us and achieve better cost-benefit decisions, like make better decisions than democratic elections would that be a preferable form of government? And what we've said is kind of like, we don't actually know where this is going to lead, but we're committed to this way of making decisions.
Right.
We don't necessarily know what the decisions are going to be in advance, but we're committed to this principle. And so I think that it's important not to make, I think this is such the question of whether to express yourself, how to express yourself is much more of an ethical decision than a theological one. And when you make it teleological, dangerous things happen. And I wrote a blog post my most recent post on Medium, and I'll read the title so that folks can search for it. The Rise of Illiberalism and the Free Rider Problem is the title. And the basic argument I make is that it is, in 2020, it is increasingly expensive and risky and dangerous to speak up. So if you disagree with the majority,
it's not, I just take it a couple steps further. It can be career ending.
Yes. Cataclysmic.
Yes.
You know, they canceled Jimmy Kimmel, for crying out loud.
Especially and you see this a lot in the world of entrepreneurs and influencers and podcasters, by the way. They are freaking the fuck out. They don't know what to say or what to do. Totally frozen.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my argument in the essay is that this creates a tragedy of the commons. It would be better from a societal perspective if everyone spoke up, especially if they disagreed, because then we would get the maximum diversity of thought, the maximum debate, and actually it creates a public good. When somebody isn't afraid to speak up, I might write 2,000 blog posts, 1,999 of them, which might be utter garbage. But if one of them is excellent and stands the test of time and is useful 100 years from now after I'm long gone, then that is like a public good, right? And so, Silicon Valley has benefited from this with all of these VC blog posts because VCs have historically felt comfortable saying, this is how we make decisions. This is the frameworks we use. This is what we think is good and what we think is bad. And when people are not afraid and they don't even bother thinking about the cost benefit analysis when they publish, they just feel free to publish. When you read something, you're reading the authentic thing. You're reading something that's really what they think, and you can trust it. But now in this environment where everything is like hyper,
that's the thing. I can totally trust you. Yeah, that's very accurate. Yeah,
when everything's like hyper considered, and it's like that they've thought about it 10 times, and they know that you're going to think about it 10 times, and you're going to come after them if you don't like what they say, and everything is Orwellian doublespeak. So you can't actually trust anything. And so if you're reading a VC's advice, you don't know if that's actually their advice.
Right.
It might be the exact opposite of what you should do. So you end up with this paradoxical logic where people start to do the opposite of what they say. It's a mess.
Oh my God. Pure chaos. And if it continues moving in that direction, I can only imagine that accelerating and becoming even more confusing and becoming even more of a risk to have an opinion. I mean, it's dangerous. Is it in your mind? To me, it is.
Yes, it is dangerous, but it's more than that. It's here's what's beautiful about it. Here's what's exciting about it.
Okay, I like this.
Let's go back to so I think we are mourning the loss of normalcy, right? And we think about the good old times when you and I were at the beach in Tulum and the world was sort of frolicking in happiness, right? Let's go back to D-Day or like Dunkirk, right? Like 1940, May of 1940. That was a world of revealed conflict. There was definitely two sides, and depending on how you read the world and what your values were, there was good and there was evil, right? Yeah. You might say ultimate tribalism, right? The ultra polarization, right? That is a world that the ancient Greeks would have rejoiced in because it was a world of dramatic conflict. Now, one of the things about a world like that is that there is an incredible sense of meaning and fulfillment that comes from the conflict, right? Definitely you don't feel like you're not living your life. You feel like you're living through history, and you feel like what you do matters, what you say matters. You're voting with your feet and with your voice and with your vote. And so, think about the war effort. It's like we gotta make sure that our boys on the field are fed, that they've got ammunition, that they've got planes, they've got bombers, they've got tanks. We got to win the war. It's this kind of thing. And then we entered in the post-World War, and then certainly after the Cold War, you have Fukuyama saying the end of history. For this period of time from, say, 1989 to 2016, you had this period of concealed conflict where, and I think, by the way, that one of the most beautiful statements of this was in the James Bond film, the third one of the Daniel Craig series, Skyfall. And M is sitting in that courtroom, and can I look up this quote, because
yeah, this is raw. Whatever you want to do.
Transcript. That's what they call it, right? Or script. Or they call it script.
I guess, yeah, script.
Here we go. Got it. Yes. Okay. What do you remember? What the name of that actress was? She's very famous.
Julia.
I forget. Anyways, I'll do
Julie
my
Dench.
Yes, that's her. Julie Dench.
Yeah.
I'll do my Julie Dench impression.
Oh, please.
Chairman, ministers. Today I've heard repeatedly how irrelevant my department has become. Why do we need agents? The 00 section. Isn't it all rather quaint? Well, I suppose I see a different world than you do. And the truth is that what I see frightens me. I'm frightened because our enemies are no longer known to us. They do not exist on the map. They are not nations. They are individuals. Look around you. Who do you fear? Can you see a face, a uniform, a flag? No. Our world is not more transparent now. It's more opaque. It's in the shadows. That's where we must do battle. So before you declare us irrelevant, ask yourselves, how safe do you feel? Just one more thing to say. My late husband was a great lover of poetry, and I suppose some of it sunk in despite my best intentions. And here today, I remember this, I think from Tennyson. We are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven. That which we are, we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. And then, boom, explosions go off, and there's like an attack in the courtroom.
I remember that scene.
Yeah. And so we went through an era of concealed conflict where yin and yang, where good and evil, where dark and light, were like went underground. Mm-hmm. And yet knowing what, do you believe that human nature had suddenly like dramatically improved in the years from 1940 to 2016? Had like all of the demons that surfaced in World War II and all the demons that suddenly No, they're in all of us. And so there's a little Nazi, a little Hitler, a little Stalin, a little Pol Pot, a little Mao in me, Francis.
Yes, this is such an important point. This is a critical point.
Yeah. And you see the Stanford prison experiment, it's like horrifying.
There you go.
And so another book, for my bookshelf, I'm gonna surface all these. I brought this from home with me on my last trip, Hayek's Road to Serfdom. And he was Austrian and obviously German, involved very much in the German intellectual scene in the 1930s, leading up to the Nazis, the National Socialists. He saw the intellectual ideas that were noble and progressive and the good intentions and the positive rhetoric that led to atrocity. He escaped and went to progressive Britain, and very connected with the progressive ideas in America at the time. And the Brits and the Americans were horrified. And they thought that this thing going on in Germany had to do with some sort of like German savagery that was like, somehow they actually had racist ideas about why Germany was fascist. The Germans were just savage and not civilized. And he said, no, guys. Actually, the same ideas that are bubbling up in our society here were just more advanced over there. And eventually they realized that they could not bring about the utopia that they wanted by peaceful and democratic means. So they seized power and the worst came to the top and it turned into this. And so he begins he begins the road to serfdom. And by the way, he used to be a socialist. And so it was experience of this that made him write this argument. And the opening line is, few discoveries are more irritating than those which expose the pedigree of ideas. Lord Acton. And his point is that like the ideas that ended in fascism were incredibly noble and pleasing to our ears today.
Yes.
And so anyways, all this is to say that like what I rejoice
and Marxism, we see a lot of the same ideology today in the pursuit of a noble cause.
Armand, you can't say that out loud. How do you say that so much of the left today is inspired by Marxism originally? How dare you say that?
Yeah, I mean, it is a risk. That's what we're talking about.
Are you not compassionate?
That's the thing. When you confuse compassion with rationality, I think I read somewhere a while ago that we vote our personality. And so what you often see is that there's a skew. I mean, compassion is something measurable. There's a certain degree to which I know I have compassion on a percentile basis versus other people. I mean, even you can take the Big Five assessment that literally measures this. And generally what you find is that women are more compassionate than men, but as a whole, liberals are more compassionate. And one of the things that often leads to is some of these ideologies that just sacrifice rationality, objective reality, the data, everything. It's scary as fuck. By the way, why I am aware, because I, like your friend, had to wake up. I mean, dude, I lived in San Francisco for 8 years myself, 7 years myself. I mean, I was in the belly, So yeah, exactly.
And look what happened in San Francisco. Look. I mean, it's just like, use your eyes. It's most of the cities where there have been riots and unrest are Democratic strongholds. San Francisco spends $80,000 per homeless person per year. What have they achieved? It could have been San Francisco. It could have been the Rome of its time. It could have been the city of the future. It could have shown us what the 21st century was all about and built a 21st century in comparison with New York, a 20th century city. Yes. And instead, they refused to build buildings. Prices went through the roof. Entrepreneurs left. There was a massive diaspora, and the city became Gotham, like this sort of dark place. And look, I believe you're Persian, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, my mom came from Iran. She was before the revolution. Her family fled during the revolution. And it was, yes, we say, okay, it's sort of like this, Islamo-fascist theocracy thing. But no. Like a lot of the rhetoric around Khomeini was like, share the wealth type of rhetoric. There was strong, the Russians kind of backed that revolution. It's like there's a strong socialist underpinning. And my father grew up in Venezuela. And look what happened in that country. And so I think that it's kind of like, look, what's the difference between, say, Andrew Carnegie and all of his philanthropy, or Andrew Mellon, who funded the National Gallery of Art, or let's pick more modern heroes. Elon Musk trying to save us and get us to Mars, right? All these people are selfish. Look at this selfish, greedy capitalist billionaire, right? And what is the difference between that and somebody who comes to my house with a gun, clocks me in the face and sends me to the hospital and takes all my stuff? The difference is they're both selfish. One has enlightened self-interest, long-term greed. Another has very short-term greed and really bad ideas about how to satisfy his wants and needs. And this goes back to something that Plato and Aristotle, I mean, we've been thinking about this, as a civilization for thousands of years, which is, ultimately you could say that all problems are education problems, which is like, if you could only, you could end all rape if you could convince the rapist that there was a way that they could get sexual pleasure that didn't involve violence. You could end all theft if you could convince the thieves that there was a way to get all wealth without violence. But yet we see what we see. So how do we deal with it? And so there's a quote in one of my favorite economists, French 19th century economist who sadly died young. Otherwise, I think France would have had a different history. Fred Bastiat, who's an incredible writer to the common man of complex ideas. And in his essay, The Seen and the Unseen, he says, do you know what economists are accused of? That is, when we disapprove of government support, we are supposed to disapprove of the thing itself whose support is discussed, and to be enemies of every kind of activity because we desire to see those activities, on the one hand, free, and on the other, seeking their own reward in themselves. Thus, if we think that the state should not interfere by taxation in religious affairs, we are atheists. If we think that the state ought not to interfere by taxation in education, we are hostile to knowledge. If we say that the state ought not by taxation to give a fictitious value to land or to any particular branch of industry, we are enemies to property and labor. If we think that the state ought not to support artists, we are barbarians who look upon the arts as useless. Against such conclusions as these, I protest with all my strength. We're dealing with the same stuff today in our rhetoric. It's so alive. This is one of my things that I say is let the dead speak. If we really heard these people, they don't have marketing teams anymore. So like I have to be their marketing team. I sign up. I'm the chief marketing officer of dead people. And like they're fucking loud and relevant.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Have you always been such an alchemist of ideas and just insanely curious? Or did you develop that and cultivate that?
I'm flattered by that, and that's very kind. You could say many unkind things have been said about me this year, and
dude, I think you're absolutely off the charts brilliant. That's what I think.
Be careful. You'll be seen as one of my friends someday, and then they're going to come after you.
Look, I got friends in every position, on every side of every aisle. I don't care. It's about
hooray for tolerance. You are a true liberal. Look, I hope it doesn't become too dangerous to be a friend of Francis. Most of the people that support everything that I say, they will not say so in public. They're texting me, they're sending me messages. I have a majority, I think, of friends and supporters, and a very visible minority of haters. But most people. Yes. The scene of it is it looks the opposite. It looks that I stand alone. I don't think I do. I think it's beautiful and prophetic that Tolkien had Aragorn save the White City of Minas Tirith with an army of the dead. He the only way to not let civilization fall was to somehow raise the dead. There's something to that. I don't know. I think that I have watched almost in an out-of-body experience with dismay at how I have become more and more extreme. I don't want to be extreme, damn it. Since I was a little kid, I've always been bullied. I've always not been a cool kid. The cool kids always do this thing with me where they I'm like the strongest of the nerds, or like the least sort of least afraid of the outcasts. And so in the hierarchy that naturally forms, the cool kids sort of are in these cliques, and they obey the hierarchy rules, and they suck up to the people above them, and they sort of gossip and snicker about me, and then they sort of find different ways, passive aggressive or aggressive, to marginalize me and I've always had kind of. In the beginning, I used to come home crying and be sad about it when I was a little kid. Eventually, I just learned to ignore them. Now I think I'm becoming more comfortable confronting them. But I think that you think of it, when people ask me, should I become an entrepreneur? Should I start my own business? My advice is no.
I agree.
I just got a question today. You're gonna love this, Armand. It's just like this question itself.
It should definitely be a default of no until they convince you and themselves why they absolutely fucking must, because their life depends on it, is a better approach, actually.
Yeah.
And I used to believe that anybody could, and in fact, perhaps should move toward an entrepreneurial life. So,
yeah, well, in a way, but it's like paradoxical. Right? You should tell them not, right? So here's my friend asking me a question, and this is a part of a formal interview. Like this will be published, and the question was, do you have any advice for young professionals looking to make a career in your field of work?
oh boy.
My response was, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. It's a line from Dante as he enters hell. And my first advice to young professionals looking to make a career as an entrepreneur is, what? Mm-hmm. Entrepreneurs don't speak like that. They don't think of themselves as young professionals looking to make a career. They think of themselves as iconoclastic revolutionaries looking to overthrow the establishment or change the world or create a dramatically more innovative, better, faster, cheaper, wilder, more beautiful, more abundant future. But anyone who asks me a question like that, I'd say this. There's the walled garden and there's the jungle. And you can stay at Google or some company like that, where you can stay in the walled garden if you want comfort and normalcy and a high salary and an up and to the right path, and lots of discretionary income and lots of vacation and a nice savings account and a lot of friends who agree with you on a lot of things.
I'm laughing because ironically, I worked at Google and I left to become an entrepreneur. So you're describing my life, man.
That's I was an intern. We were both interns at Google. Yeah. So as soon as you say, okay, the danger of leaving the walled garden, and this is why I encourage my friend, it's people think it's like, oh, I'll try. And then if I don't like it, I'll go back to being the walled garden. And I say, like, be careful. It's like taking the red pill, right? It's like, it is. When you go into the jungle, you suddenly are in a survival mode where anyone can come and eat you. And you're in the market. So you have to, if you want to survive, you have to figure out where the demand is and you have to supply it. Or if you're going to supply something that you really want to supply, you have to convince the demand that they need it. And this process leads you towards extremity because desperate times call for desperate measures. Like normal doesn't work. And so as you move in that direction, you actually become like a cat that is feral. You're like a feral cat. You can't go back to like getting milk on the porch. You're gonna like scratch your owner's face.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like little what's the classic cat name? Little Whiskers or little little Mittens. Little Mittens ain't too friendly anymore.
Yeah.
Became like a little like bobcat.
Been through hell. Yeah. They're suffering in the jungle.
So absolutely. I'm like this mangy, traumatized cat that's just not going to get this. Like,
that's an awesome analogy. I
can't give me enough therapy to become normal at this point. I'm far gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And your first company, how old were you?
Right out of school.
Okay.
Well, I did a kind of an entrepreneurial project in school, but I was 21.
Okay. And now here you are building an incredible company, man. And this one's also a rocket ship, but from, a lot more than I do, obviously, but I can tell you from the outside, man, it's brilliant what you've built. And it looks like it's really a lasting, sustainable enterprise that you're building, man. It's solving a real need. Wow. We got to talk after this about me getting involved, actually, and I need some help.
Love that.
Tell me how this
is like from the outside, because I don't think we've talked about it for a couple years, and so I have the curse of knowledge at this point. I have no idea.
I remember when you were raising money. And I remember when I just first kind of came across the the concept of what you were attempting to build, and it sounded very innovative. It sounded hyper efficient. And I know that market of, I don't know what to call it, but like I've used a lot of services where they're a service-based business. They're people to develop I mean, the simplest version I would say, by the way, is like a service that I used for a long time. I actually still use is Fancy Hands. Okay. This is one individual person on a task by task basis that I submit the task and it gets passed to that individual. They promote it as like, hey, we're in the US. We'll get your task done. But the amount of variability in the outcome is really difficult to deal with.
Yeah. You can't rely on it.
You can't rely on it. And I can't ever like bring it into my personal life for anything important, because they'll often, if I try to use it like I'm using a dedicated assistant, it's not a dedicated assistant. And to attempt to use it in that way just simply doesn't work. And I've often dreamt of what you've built, man. It's like, so I don't want to put the words to it because I think you'll do a much more beautiful job of describing your company. Yeah. But I can tell you that the moment that I saw you launch it and make it real and begin to expand it, all of a sudden, by the way, I've known you, and then I hear people bringing you up in your company. I'm like, okay, he's up to something. He's making it happen now. Like, this is good. People are jumping in, they're using it. And then my business partner at one point was like, hey, like, we should check these guys out. I'm like, oh, I know Francis. Like, oh,
so that's great. All of a sudden, we just saw our website traffic go way up, and we're like, what's going on? And it's totally, things like this are completely random and unpredictable, like how word of mouth eventually sort of happens, and it's like wildfire, but you don't really know what caused it. What's exciting about Invisible is it is now at a point where it's compounding. So every quarter, the operations get so much better, and the product gets so much better, and the work quality gets so much better, and the experience gets better. And so I'm like perpetually discontent and frustrated because I like, the vision of where it's supposed to be in a year and 2 years and 3 years is like very real for me, and I see the gap. But all I need to do to encourage myself is just remember where we were a year ago.
Yeah, man.
Years ago.
Right.
We're like 4 years in now. I'm going to pretend you've never heard about it, and I'll just try to explain it. We're creating a new category called work sharing, where you can easily offload any work you can explain on a Zoom call. All you need to do is jump on a Zoom call with our operations team. We're really smart, and you can explain a business problem you're dealing with, a process, a workflow, a project, any digital operations problem you need a solution for, and we will build you a process and have it running within 24 to 48 hours. You're going to get a solution overnight. And whether it's like you're an insurance company and you need to process insurance claims, or you need us to schedule all your meetings for you and label emails in your inbox. The range expands from individual workflows to big, Fortune 500 industrial scale workflows. And we can do custom business critical complex workflows that are highly secure. And here's how it works. Once you explain it to us and we ask you a bunch of questions, we have it running on our digital assembly line. And I think of it as the coolest factory on the internet, where we are trying to industrialize knowledge work the same way that Henry Ford industrialized manufacturing in the last century. We have 200 workers in 16 countries around the world that go through our training system and train in all these processes. And we give them step-by-step instructions in our process builder. And they log into Amazon workspaces that are secure here in the US. And they do the work. We record their screens, we record their system data, and then we do an analysis of every step that they're doing and use automation tools to completely automate the most basic steps. And then we give them tools to speed them up on the other steps. And as we cut our costs, we give up to 50% of those cost savings back to our clients. So you're going to get a unit price in the beginning, say it's like $10 per insurance claim. And then as we like eliminate half the costs, the insurance claim will drop to $9, $8, $7, $6, $5 an insurance claim. And it'll keep dropping as long as we get better, faster, and cheaper. And the amazing thing is that our incentives are aligned. Our margins are going to either stay the same or go up. Our revenue is going to stay the same or go up as you delegate more to us. But it's going to get cheaper and cheaper for you. And the inspiration for this was, I'll get you another book.
I love it.
Henry Ford wrote this incredible autobiography. This is like a cheat sheet to like how he did what he did. And what he did was a miracle. And he figured out how to get take the price of a car from a luxury thing that only the rich can afford. And the price of the car went down every single year. And yet their revenue went up and up and up, and their margins went up and up and up. How? How is that even possible? It makes sense. And it is I call it the deflationary gospel of capitalism. Better, faster, cheaper. If you truly create productivity improvements, and this is what was going on, the magic, the mystery, the alchemy of what was going on in the factory. Factory, they were re-engineering the way they were building these things year after year after year. And so they just got so unbelievably efficient. And the efficiency is what allowed the pie to get bigger for everyone. Their margins were up, people bought more and consumed more. And I think that we've forgotten that so much of the progress in the 20th century was from things like the washing machine, the vacuum cleaner, electric lights, the telephone, that created insane efficiency improvements. And we've, I think a lot of like sort of millennial hipster luxury has come from like the idea that like the price of a latte will go up instead of down. And like we're going to have like, and I think that's nice too. And that is the kind of the innovation gospel of capitalism, that we can keep coming up with new luxuries that people had never thought of. But that kind of, the two complement each other. Like you can, if most things are becoming commoditized and are becoming better, faster, and cheaper, then there's more and more money liberated to spend on discretionary innovations and luxuries, which then actually get commoditized. And so you always have this cycle.
It's a cycle.
But it's very much the opposite of UBI, which is, I think, of the inflationary gospel of socialism, which is that like, look, if we will really care about is creating a world of abundance where the standard of living goes up for everybody. If the price of food, the quality of food, the efficiency of getting food to you goes up and up and up, then you are richer. If the price and quality and ease of finding housing goes up and up and up, it's better. If the price and quality and ease of getting healthcare goes up and up, you're getting, so deflation is truly creating consumer surplus. And we should, whenever that is failing, whenever markets are becoming inflationary, we should be highly suspicious that it's the fault of the market, that there's probably some weird regulatory distortion that is resulting in inflation. Because when prices are going up, think of it from the point of view of an entrepreneur. Capital and talent should be flooding any market where the prices are going up and up and up. So how come housing is getting more and more expensive? Is it really that entrepreneurs are not sufficiently incentivized? No, there's more and more money to be made, but no, it's way more regulated. Same thing with education. Same thing with healthcare. And so the idea of like, well, what we really need to do is redistribute wealth and give everybody more cash. That's how we create abundance. I'm highly suspicious of. So I consider myself, and progressives get totally tweaked about this. I consider myself not a capitalist, but a neo-Marxist. I think of Invisible as kind of a capitalist workers' revolution, where 70% of the world makes less than $10 a day, and they're underutilized in the extreme. And if you care about human potential, you should want Silicon Valley startups like Invisible to figure out how to use that human potential instead of just building software. Figure out how to get human. And then similarly, on the demand side, if we can double the productivity of an average knowledge worker, what is that going to do to prices across the economy? What's that going to do to creativity and innovation? Like we can create the bold and brilliant future where everything is abundant without the need to like regulate and confiscate everything.
Mm-hmm.
and brand.
Yeah. There's so many things I want to ask you there. Man, I could talk to you for hours. On the note of invisible,
Yeah.
just to kind of more deeply understand what I know, obviously, like what you set out to do, what you do in year 1, year through year 3 is obviously going to be very different than I know the aim that you have in your mind. So what is your vision from 3 years from today, or perhaps even the version of we've reached the critical status that I was hoping to attain in the marketplace?
Yeah. This one's actually so um I'm very expansive. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give you a vision for
Mm-hmm.
invisible as a service, but for invisible as a company, I ultimately wanted to start many companies that are going to do many things. But like,
Yeah, I imagine it's sort of like an Uber effect. There's a dominance in one arena that I know you have planned, but Uber is so much more than ride sharing.
right. So I'm going to tell you the vision for ride sharing. Let's say
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about Alphabet, the holding company.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. So I think most of your audiences watch the movie Iron Man and is
Mm-hmm.
familiar with that metaphor. When I started Invisible, I had never heard of business process outsourcing. I'd never heard of business process automation. I wanted an Iron Man suit for my personal productivity. I was spending too much time on administrative, organizational, productivity work, and not enough time on creativity, strategic problem solving, big picture stuff. And as a result, I felt like I didn't have enough agency. And I'm sure a lot of like
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs, particularly when they start out, they're just like a dude in a garage. Yeah. Yeah. They feel like, man, other CEOs have raised millions of dollars and have all these people working for them. They can do some real shit in the world. But it's just like me and my dog. And like, it's very hard for, I like, do I really need to sell 50% of my company to investors in order to like have enough capital and hire enough people to actually get anything done? There's this feeling of like,
Mm-hmm.
execution is too expensive. Like
Yes.
implementation firepower is way too expensive. And I think of it like, Uber drivers drive cars for us.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's private driver. That was their thing. Invisible is like drives apps for you. So you just say, I want this workflow to run. Here's how I want it to run. Go. We will run it and we will build it and upgrade it and do it best in class and do it efficiently. And so you can have this invisible army logging into all your accounts and running all these business processes for you. And so like the future would be, imagine a company could IPO with one employee. Like that would be insane, right? So now, okay, obviously there's so many, I don't actually know if that's possible. It might be that companies in the future IPO with much smaller headcount in general.
Mm-hmm.
You might think that there's like really 2 companies inside of every company. Company A is the real company. Let's just say that let's say the company is creating a smart oven, like my friend Matt's company. And, these are the hardware engineers, the software engineers, UI and UX designers,
Right.
the people that are coming up with the marketing magic and
Laying down all that architecture and yeah.
the CEO and his team coming up with the strategy of the company and getting the distribution deals that they need. And like that is where the real IP and genius and energy lives, right? And then there's like company B, which has like all the sort of organs, which is like, well, just like every company, we need to hire people and onboard them and train them. And we need to run this sales channel, and we need to upload things to our Salesforce and or tag them in this way, and blah, 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 blah. It's like all these things that just everybody needs to do. So I think of what Invisible is doing as like sequencing the corporate process genome and allowing every company has completely unique and custom processes, but the individual steps are like Lego blocks that like we've seen over and over again. And so if we automate the steps, we get better at doing it for everyone without sharing anybody's IP. So that's that. But that's sort of like a macro vision for the company. But now I'm going to give you the individual vision, because I think the individual UX is what gets me excited. So think about Fortune 100 CEOs like Tim Cook at Apple, or heads of state, presidents and prime ministers of different nations. They don't just have an assistant. They don't just have a chief of staff.
Right.
They have the office of the CEO, the office of the president. They've got, like, sometimes they spend up to $10 million a year on this $10 million a year A team that allows them to be all strategic all the time, eking out the maximum dollar per hour out of their time.
Yes.
So that
God, what a dream. I'm just getting off hearing that.
Yeah, they feel empowered to delegate unlimited everything. And one of the books that inspired me in college, and I've just become friends with the author, Michael Gelb, is How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. And you think about the Renaissance humanist tradition and the belief in the genius of the individual as opposed to the madness of crowds. And, like, it is terrible how the dark side of human nature, but the light, I mean, my God, think about Da Vinci, like what he did, it's almost mind boggling. And I think that Silicon Valley's focused so long on the Turing test. And what I wrote a post called The Wizard and the Wand, how, like, most people in Silicon Valley think that technological potential and human potential are directly opposed, and that, robots are and AI is going to take away all of our jobs. We're going to have this employment problem. And that's why we need UBI and socialism. Yes. And I'm saying, no, the wand is never going to replace the wizard. The wizard, the true potential of the wizard is just
great analogy,
increasingly revealed. And yes, the wizard might swallow the wand. I might swallow my iPhone per se. I might achieve a kind of fusion or symbiosis with technology. But the true way to measure technology is not when technology surpasses humans, the Turing test. It's the Da Vinci test. It's when contemporary humans surpass ancient geniuses. It's like, I think Da Vinci, sort of like in a basketball test, like basketball stars like duke it out and they're like, who can dunk better? It's like, the Shaquille O'Neal or Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan of creativity today. Who is that? I don't know. Give me a name. Is it Jason? When with our iPhones and with our MacBooks, when we can go toe to toe with Da Vinci with his quill and parchment and win, then I'll be
talking about 500, 600 years later. Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We have 500, 600 years of all this extra knowledge, and I bet you he could win on most creativity tests.
I think you're absolutely right.
This is what Steve Jobs' original vision was for the personal computer. He said a bicycle for the mind. He said human beings kind of suck as from a locomotive efficiency point of view. But if you give a human being a bicycle, they outperform a condor, which is the most efficient animal. And so he's like, look, I'm going to equip you. He's like, I'm an arms dealer and I'm selling you weapons in the productivity race. And I'm going to make you gods among men. This was kind of the personal computing vision. And you hear his 1984 speech against IBM. And he's like, no. They've been focused on corporate computing. We're going to make, computing for the masses. And instead of just, big companies having superpowers and it being some of the creepy Orwellian thing, individual creativity will flourish. And they had the Think Different campaign. I mean, my God, he had a vision. Yeah. And yet we live in this dystopian reality in 2020 when all this shit is better than ever. And there's an app for everything and nothing is perfect yet. And the answer is that we've sort of in the current Silicon Valley paradigm, people use technology or technology uses people in a way. Like we create these tools and then we become slaves of our tools and we're spending all day long, like, hunchbacked, like, sort of.
Absolutely.
Technology at its best when it's invisible. I will believe that it's working when I can, instead of waking up every day to come to my desk, I can wake up every day, walk outside, hear the birds chirping, and be anywhere. And through some Starlink satellite connection and my AirPods, I can listen to my email inbox and tell Invisible how to answer my emails for me, and I can sort of liquidly move between calls, and I can have ideas, and they'll just be implemented for me, and I can truly be a wizard.
It reminds me of the movie Her, because I love that notion of how they represent technology just kind of being in the air and in the background versus this like very physical, tangible thing that's an accessory. So have you seen that? Have you seen Her?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. God, man, what a fucking vision. What a vision. That's remarkable. That's remarkable. And it really does take that. I want to go back to some of the things that you said. You're a man who's out in the jungle, and it's a requirement for you to have such a scary and exciting vision that you can run toward and be impatient with as well. It's like, I need to get here now and faster. And that's the type of nonconformity that's required as an entrepreneur. And here you are. It's like you're, third company.
Second investor-backed company.
Second what?
Second investor-backed company.
Oh, okay. Second investor-backed company. And like, again, creating something remarkable. Because the thing about you is, someone like you have to be an entrepreneur. You have to be, because to let this level of vision die inside of us oftentimes is what drives a human being crazy. And I think another thing that you've done really well is answer the call of the fire and the intuitive pull that's inside of you. You just kind of, so many people spend their lives ignoring, rejecting, distracting themselves from these urges. And then they come to someone like you and say, and I'm not this exact example you brought up, but like, I'm sure there are others where you can sense they have an unlived life within them. And then they come to you, or they come to me and they say, should I? The fact that you're asking me, that's a tragedy in and of itself, right? We have to. And that was the same thing that happened to me. It's like, my back's against the wall. I'm sitting there at Google. I know there's more for me. We all go through this in some form in our lives. And then that jarring feeling, that beckoning, that pull comes again. And it's like, hey, you want to jump now? You want to leap into the jungle? Because this could be a great time. And then there's your voice saying, no, I don't know enough. I haven't learned enough. I'm too young. I'm too this. I'm too that. And so then you continue living that life. And one of the things I just want to acknowledge you for, man, is just not just courage in the sense of how you speak and how you express, but courage in the sense of how you live, because it's important to be that example for other people. That in and of itself may be the most powerful thing, not just what you express, but how a person lives. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to be dead someday, and everyone will have forgotten me probably. And who cares, right? I think.
What do you do with that? What do you do with that concept that you just said?
You're getting at something that is so human. And four references came to mind. One is from Solomon, and David. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but the fear of man is something that they rail against in Psalms and Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, and in Job. The wisdom literature of the Judeo-Christian scriptures. And I think that, like, true expression and creativity, you kind of need to. Let me see if I can come up with a secular version of this, because it is so true. I don't want the religious language to block people
overtake
hearing the message, which is, let's see if I can if you identify as a seeker, someone who, maybe you're agnostic. Maybe actually you're an agnostic and everything that you know leads you to believe that there is no God and you're an atheist. Fine. But you identify as a seeker. You really are seeking the true, the good, the beautiful. You are seeking your full potential. You want the best for yourself and for the world. You want to live life to the fullest. So be it. And here's the religious language again. This is David, and then Jesus quotes David as, when he's asked, what is the most important commandment? Love the Lord with all your God, with all your heart, with all your might. It's I'm going to put this in secular language. Seek with all your heart, with all your might, with all your strength. Don't let anything get in the way of objective truth. And that's a loaded term, so we'll talk about that in a second. But like, when you start fearing man, when you start being afraid of the crowd, the mob, majority, am I going to be right? Am I going to be wrong? Am I going to lose money? Is it going to hurt? if you start being afraid of the utilitarian outcomes instead of the ethical principles, maximizing your seeking, then eventually that voice starts to die. It's like killing your conscience. It's like everyone has a conscience. Paul says in Romans that like the law of the Lord is written in people's hearts. I know I'm using a lot of religious language, but like,
no, I love it. I think they're great ways to reference truth.
They are great. Like I'm not only a Christian, I'm a Taoist. I've studied Sufi literature and Zen literature and Taoist literature and Buddhist literature, and there's these things come up again and again. In the Tao Te Ching, it says, I want to get the actual quote. I'm not as good as quoting it, but it says, "The way that is true sounds foolish," and that is like kind of the ultimate. iBooks can't laugh at or move as fast as me. Okay. When a superior man hears of the Tao, he immediately begins to embody it. When an average man hears of the Tao, he half believes it, half doubts it. When a foolish man hears of the Tao, he laughs out loud. If he didn't laugh, it wouldn't be the Tao. Thus it is said, the path into the light seems dark. The path forward seems to go back. The direct path seems long. True power seems weak. True purity seems tarnished. True steadfastness seems changeable. True clarity seems obscure. The greatest art seems unsophisticated. The greatest love seems indifferent. The greatest wisdom seems childish. The Tao is nowhere to be found, yet it nourishes and completes all things. So
God, please send that to me.
And scripture, now going back to the Christian side, says, seek and ye shall find. Knock on the door, it will be open to you. So here are a couple of references. C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters introduces something that secular people will find hard to accept, which is the idea of spiritual warfare. You might think of it as like a demon on one shoulder and an angel on another. And to put this in secular terms, psychologically, you could think of this as an externalization or a metaphor for your inner dialogue and your inner voices. And which voices you listen to, the secular person will be more open to hearing this from a Native American Indian. There's the Native American Indian myth of the wolf, like which wolf do you feed? It's like a really important thing. So in the Screw Tape Letters and in The Great Divorce, he describes what happens to somebody who ignores the voice that leads them away from the group towards being a contrarian, towards following their own truth, towards taking the risk. And when you've ignored it and you've stayed in your safe job and your safe relationship, then eventually you actually start to resent people who do, or you lose the power to say yes even when you want to.
Wow.
The sunk cost psychology.
That's huge, man.
The cognitive dissonance is so high that you actually lose your free will and you're like trapped. And Ayn Rand in Ayn Rand's novel, she nails this so well. Her heroes might be almost otherworldly, but to quote her, like she nails her villains. The villains in Ayn Rand's novels, and this she I think her novels epitomize what Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil. That evil is rarely, we think of evil like the last Avengers movie was terrible. Because also the last Star Wars one. These villains are getting more and more grotesque.
Yeah,
they're like these like I wonder who's the bad guy in this movie. It's like horrible monster who's like pathologically like I want to destroy the world. The really convincing villains are the ones that Frodo says to Aragorn, like I trust you because a servant of the enemy would seem fairer but feel fouler. And it's like it's the real villains, the ones that seem to be the good guys.
Yeah.
And the real lies are the ones that are 3/4 truth. But there's a twist. And so Ayn Rand nails this with her villains because her villains kind of admire her heroes, but they're always sort of being passive aggressive and subverting them, and they don't know why. They don't know why they can't sort of drop their baggage and go beyond the other side. And so eventually they sort of gang up and kill the villains, sort of like a scapegoat exercise where it's just like, well, they're too exceptional. I have to kill them. And I'm going to go, I know I'm all over the place, but I'm just going to go for it.
Oh, it's fantastic. This is a DaVinci exercise, by the way. This is how he played. This is just play.
Yeah. It is just play. So going back to Lewis, Lewis writing during World War II, as socialism swept England, he says, what I want to fix your attention on is the vast overall movement towards the discrediting and finally the elimination of every kind of human excellence, moral, cultural, social, or intellectual. And it is not pretty to notice how democracy, in the incantatory sense, democracy, is now doing for us the work that was once done by the most ancient dictatorships and by the same methods. You remember how one of the Greek dictators, they called them tyrants then, sent an envoy to another dictator to ask his advice about the principles of government. The second dictator led the envoy into a field of corn, and there he snicked off with his cane the top of every stalk that rose an inch or so above the general level. The moral was plain. Allow no preeminence among your subjects. Let no man live who is wiser or better or more famous or even handsomer than the mass. Cut them all down to a level, all slaves, all ciphers, all nobodies, all equals. All equals. Thus, the tyrants could practice, in a sense, democracy. But now democracy can do the same work without any other tyranny other than her own. No one need now go through the field with a cane. The little stalks will now of themselves bite off the tops of the big ones. The big ones are beginning to bite off their own in their desire to be like stalks. And so you hear this kind of creepy thing in our, coronavirus rhetoric, like in this together. It's like I saw a Ralph Lauren ad in Manhattan the other day that just creeped me out. I took a photo of it. Let me find it. Yep, here it is. It is in the spirit of togetherness that we will rise. Ralph Lauren.
What?
Gross. Get away.
Get away. Oh, man. I love that. God, yeah. I have to go back to what you talked about at the very beginning here. The your version of let's go to objective truth. You said you were going to talk about that. Objective truth. You mentioned that you would
ask me a question.
Yeah,
I'm hoping we get to this because I want to hit this.
Objective truth and subjective truth. Is there such thing as objective truth?
Narrow is the way. It is so easy to go wrong in answering this question. This is one of the great questions. I'm going to describe two ways of erring, two ways of going astray, and we see them both in our world. One is the fundamentalist mistake. So the fundamentalist, whether they're a Christian or a Muslim or a progressive or a Republican, like you see it in all the isms. All of the isms have fundamentalists.
Yes.
The fundamentalist mistake is we have a monopoly on truth.
Yes.
We have received truth. Here it is. This is it. If you want to know what the answer is, this expert will tell you, or this book will tell you, and this is this is literally what it is. Here are all the things you should do with your life. Here's how you live a good life. Here are all the symbols of the tribe. Here's how you become one of us. It's us against them. They're wrong. We need to beat them. Done. Mm-hmm. Okay. What's attractive about there's so many things that are attractive.
Many. Yes.
It is so easy to like snicker at that and ignore, what is the thing in scripture? You have a log in your eye, but you point out the speck in someone else's eye. Mm-hmm. It's like everyone can point out everyone else's fundamentalism magically, but they're not able to see their own confirmation biases. And this has been one of my main conversations with Jason. And I think that, other people that think about this question are very much afraid of their own error, and therefore they will be quiet. So this is the attractive thing about fundamentalism, is that fundamentalism leads to compelling, overwhelming, and it is incredibly effective. And so remind me to talk about weak frame, strong frame, fuzzy frame. But I'll just say fundamentalists are strong frame thinkers, and they drive huge change in the world. And so it is like, the Book of the Samurai, like the samurais were very fundamentalist. Whatever your Lord asks you to do, whether it is right or wrong, you shall do it, and you shall do it with all your strength, and you shall kill. And then you're like, okay, all right, I will become insane and desperate to die. Let's go. That's fundamentalism. If you wanted an army of fundamentalists or relativists, which would you want?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Okay, the other side is the relativists, and actually what Hayek was so, I think this book, again, The Road to Serfdom, is so unbelievably important because he talks about how the two are basically the same thing. The relativists become fundamentalists in this really weird, transformation or metamorphosis. Here's the relativist thing. There is no truth. All truths are equal. Like there is no objective truth. There is no God, or therefore all gods are gods. You're God, I'm God. There is no one prime value, therefore all values. It's just this complete morass of denial of truth. And this leads bad places fast. Yeah. And there are many ways it goes, but one way it goes is to suicide. And nihilism expressed as suicide, because nihilism can express in other ways. Where it's just okay, well, what's the fucking point? The universe is a result of pure randomness. I'm here for this brief moment of time, and then I die. Nothing. And so you have this beautiful. I haven't talked enough with Jason to know what his underlying philosophical position is, but let's just assume Jason is agnostic and secular. So much of his work is actually a combat with nihilism, saying that there is beauty in the world, but even then, in doing so, he undermines a relativist position, because to even say, he's an aesthete. I think if there's anything about Jason, it's that he paints the world with an aesthetic brush. He observes the world through an aesthetic wonder, and he's wow, there's so much beauty in the world. And what's great about the aesthetic way of seeing the world versus the moral way of seeing the world is that it's sort of inherently less fundamentalist, but it does honor truth. It's like truth, goodness, and beauty, right? So even if the aesthetic person doesn't even want to get into a conversation about objective beauty and is still saying, well, beauty is subjective, at least they're saying that there is such a thing as beauty. Right. And we can disagree on what is most beautiful, but at least beauty somehow gives life meaning. It's not the full abyss, but the full abyss where you just disappear is complete relativity. Nothing. There is nothing transcendent. The other way that relativism goes is, well, if nothing is true, then the majority is the most important thing. And this is the Marxist direction, where the Marxists are atheists. They deny objective truth. But therefore, the claims of the class, the claims of this oppressed group, the original Marxist thing was the poor versus the rich. But then Gramsci opened up and created identity politics, where it's my minority, oppressed minority versus your oppressed minority. And then, by the way, do you know the origins of the word fascism?
No.
It comes from the ancient Roman word fascis. And fascis was literally a bundle of sticks. And the idea was that, you can break one stick, but if you have enough sticks together, you can't break it. So Marx just had one idea, which is the poor versus the rich. And then after World War I, they realized that actually that didn't work. You couldn't actually create the uprising you wanted. So Gramsci blew it all up, and he said, no, we need to create this minority and this minority and this minority. They're aggrieved. Get these identity politics groups together, and then them together will become a majority and beat the others. So the thing that's scary about this is that it leads to kind of the world we see today, where we've kind of abandoned any sort of tradition of truth, and it's the only claims that sound true in this tradition are my truth, my oppressed group's truth. And the weird thing is that it is kind of like, if you're dealing with somebody who's really intellectually honest about it, it's hard to be intellectually honest about this position, because it's self-abnegating, it's self-destructive, because the emotional appeal of anything neo-Marxist or identity politics based, anything that is about injustice and oppression and I'm the victim and I have a claim to power, is that it appeals to your Christian virtue, even if you don't realize you're a Christian. It appeals to your compassion, that injustice, your innate sense,
big time,
that injustice is wrong, objectively wrong.
Right, objective, and that will inflame people.
If there is no good and evil, it is simply might makes right, and it is a pure power game, and it's whoever has a majority seizes power and kills the minority. And that's literally what Hayek said. That is what happened in Germany under fascism. Enough, a certain number of sticks got together and bundled up against other sticks, and they killed the other sticks. That's what happened. So this is why relativism leads to fundamentalism, ironically.
Wow. Very ironic.
So here's the narrow path. The narrow path is, and this is the way this is my path.
Okay.
Path, okay? And it's a struggle. I believe in objective truth. I believe that there is a true, a beautiful, and a good to be found, and I seek it, and I move in the direction of it, and I align all of my actions with it. And so I feel like I have a duty towards it, to serve it with my life. And so I will speak up my truth. I will act my truth. I will try to incarnate my truth in art. I will try to incarnate my truth in my work. But I do not have a monopoly on truth.
And you don't have an identification with a certain fundamentalist viewpoint within that narrow path, I take it.
That's right. There are smart people who disagree with me. There are truths that are unpopular, even with me, that I don't know. There's truths that are unknown. There are almost certainly bugs in my code and flaws in my reasoning. There are almost certainly things that I believe now that I won't believe in the future, because someone will do me the service of helping me see how I'm wrong. So actually, the true, peaceful, democratic approach is to believe in debate. Like, democracy is not about voting, and it's not about stand up and be counted, and it's not about like, let's get, gang up together and get this bill passed. It's actually about the idea that, like, through the friction of debate and through expression, that we are going to eventually move towards truth, because we're going to sharpen each other and expose the weakest points in each other's arguments. We don't need to agree with each other at the end of it. Actually, the best thing is sort of like my Jewish friends who I love. I'm like, I'm not Jewish, but I go to Torah study and I like celebrate their culture. They say two Jews, three opinions. And like a really good America would be 350 Americans, a billion opinions. That would be a good America. And that would be an Emersonian America. And so I believe in this process. And so, most people misunderstand this about Peter Thiel, and it's been written, and I think this is true about me. I may be very aggressive, but I don't believe in violence. Violence is, I believe in self-defense. I have a black belt. I know how to wield a sword. I know how to use a gun. I went through 3 years of military training in ROTC. Like, I believe that there's a certain martial and masculine. There is a place for force.
Yeah.
It is, warfare and violence is so terrible and frightening that the whole civilization project is to minimize violence. And one of the best ways of minimizing violence is minimizing the need for agreement. So the whole idea of a liberal or liberty-loving society is to say, look, the way that we can empower everyone to disagree on everything is if we all agree that physical violence is not okay, and theft is not okay. So that is the sort of liberal idea, and it's not progressive utopia. It's a liberal entopia, where like everyone can go out and pursue their own visions of happiness, their own ideas, their own truths. We can debate and we'll learn from each other, and the best ideas will win eventually. But We're not going to try to force agreement on things that are just too hard to agree on. We're going to agree on the minimum thing.
Right. Right.
And I think
Wow.
that comes from, in other words, the political philosophy is nested in an underlying epistemology, like an underlying belief about truth in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dude.
And I believe you can believe in this objective truth without being religious. You can believe that this is the way to live your life with the highest empowerment and the most meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. And just you unpacking that, by the way, is just so incredibly valuable for me, for people, just highlighting the irony of the two paths that we often see, and then illuminating that there is this narrow path. And that as we attempt to walk down that path, having the humility to know you don't know what the fuck you're doing and that your opinion might change tomorrow is so important, because then you protect yourself against the possibility of becoming fundamentalist. You also are definitely protecting yourself against an aimless, meaningless existence, which would be unbearable. So thank you. I have a quick question. Have you watched or listened to Jordan Peterson's Psychological Significance of the Bible? Are you familiar with this?
So I adore Peterson. I've listened to tens of hours of his stuff, and I agree with everything pretty much. I'm a just fanboy. I have not listened to his Bible series, which is crazy because
please do. I did the same thing.
I painted most of the Old Testament.
Yeah. Well, I did the same thing. I listened to a lot of his lectures, but never actually went directly to the Bible, the biblical series, which is the psychological significance of. But I can tell you, you will love it, because so much of what you're talking about is highlighted and illuminated and unpacked. I mean, it takes him a 2.5 hour lecture to get to Genesis. To start it. So, just to set the stage, and I think it's like 8, 9, 10 parts. I don't know. I'm on part number 3. I mean, it's monstrous, but I absolutely love it.
To the progressives who probably aren't in the room, but to the people who are in the room that will talk to them, they're going to react to this and be like, why are you studying this, like, dead white Judeo-Christian sort that is like, full of misogyny and blah, blah, blah. Let the dead speak. They have a voice too. I think that the thing is not to preference this one tradition over all traditions. Yeah. Although I might personally do that, but I don't think as a society we should somehow impose this one tradition. But the point is that whether you read Norse mythology or Native American Indian mythology or Greek mythology or Egyptian mythology or Hindu mythology, or the secular Western tradition,
even Zoroastrianism that came from Iran and Persia. I mean, those are incredible tenets of
that we should be living and operating and thinking in the 21st century in the context of all human knowledge and all human lives. There are thousands of years of humans that have lived before us, and it takes an unbelievable chronological snobbery to impose all of our values and thoughts on them and think that we are superior in every way, instead of recognizing that we have much to learn from the past, and that the best ideas. Most people ask me I wrote a bio of myself, and I hate writing bios of myself, and I describe myself as by a paradox. The paradox is that I am both a classicist and an iconoclast. The sense that I'm a classicist is I believe in the past. I believe in the dead people. I'm not a socialist, and yet I've gotten so much from the actual socialists. I've read Veblen. I've read Walter Benjamin. I've read Marx. I've read Lenin. I've read Tolstoy. Not Tolstoy was not. Sorry. I've read the Frankfurt School. I could go on. I've read a lot of socialists, and actually, Orwell to some extent describes himself as a socialist, although he sort of moved so far to the right later on. Right. There's there's truth in original sources and truth in the great conversation. You can almost like, the really important thing is not necessarily, the music is not necessarily in the notes, it's in the space between the notes. And so when you take it all into consideration, what emerges from it is these muses that like, start to live in your head, and they start to have opinions about the world today, and they start to give you ideas about the future. And I think we're going to come up with the best ideas about the future from not just from practicing creativity like mad, like Da Vinci, but from actually learning from Da Vinci about how to be futuristic. That which is ancient is very futuristic. That like, I love some of the Marvel movies for this, because they take Asgard, the Norse mythology of like the Asgard, and they make it this like sci-fi, not this fantasy movie. And I love that. And the reason why I'm an iconoclast is I think that we're getting it so wrong in the present. The present, is very much ignorant of the past, and it has, therefore, I think, very sort of bland, banal ideas about the future. And rant.
Oh, Francis, so every conversation I've had, every podcast episode I've had is like one of my babies. So it's very hard for me to ever have a preference, but man, oh man,
Daddy.
This might be, you can call me dad. Anybody can call me daddy.
Number 27.
Oh man, I'm telling you, this has been one of my absolute favorite conversations. I probably have to say the most impactful, my favorite. I really do. I want to work toward wrapping up, and I'd love for you to kind of put a nice little bow on this, however you'd like.
Right. Okay. I do want to do an episode in the future, if you have me back on, about the actual art and the expression and the creativity. Like, but we'll leave that. I'll say that, but I'll say this about it, that bad art is the secret to good art, that you have to rejoice in amateurism and in the pathetic failing. You don't yell at a baby for falling when they're trying to walk, or like you don't like yell at a kid for falling off their bicycle when they're trying to learn how to ride a bicycle. You celebrate the attempt to live and to take risks. And I think that one of the things that comes to me most loudly and strongly when I read The Dead is this celebration of actually but the warning and the inspiration, at once, of the shadow side of human nature, which I don't think we're going to get rid of. It's in us. Yeah. The darkness within us and the light within us. And some of the best thinkers, I think about the founding fathers. The Federalist Papers are behind me, and I've been rereading them. They were not naive romantics who thought that humans were perfect. If all men were angels, no government would be necessary. Madison. And they actually knew that humans would disagree on tons of things. Hamilton, Federalist Paper number 10, faction is sown in the heart of man. So this really important question comes of like, how do you minimize the expression of madness and darkness, and maximize the expression of genius and light?
Without eliminating one or the other.
Yes. And I think one of the most important beliefs of all, foundational, root level beliefs, is a belief in agency. Even if, so I know a journalist who has a speech impediment, a handicap. And so he writes, beautiful. And so, Stephen Hawking in a wheelchair, changed history. My friend Nicholas says, all 7 billion players are on this field for a reason, and they need to find it. And the tragedy is when they don't go after it and find it. And it is very easy to succumb to nihilism, to learn helplessness, to feel like exhausted and overpowered, and to feel guilty, and to feel shame, and to feel blocked. And the noble human effort is to, take a step and take another step to have the daring to both think big thoughts and think practical thoughts, and to find your agency and to keep going, and not just go, not just become a specialist who is inframed and told by society that your whole life is just to do this one specialized thing, but to fight for being a human and to fight for all the things that are, to unearth and uncover all the things inside of you. And my friend Samo Bergia, he says this thing that to me is both damning and inspiring. There were more geniuses per capita in ancient Athens in the Golden Age of around 400 BC. There were more geniuses in that period of time than there are geniuses in New York City today, with 10 million people, like the orders of magnitude bigger city. There are like 90. There was a historian of science, something DeSola Price, who realized that 90% of scientists that have ever lived are alive today, and yet are we creating 9 times more science in our generation than in all previous generations?
That is wild.
No. So this is damning and inspiring. And in science fiction, you see this in Asimov's Foundation series, this fear of like, are we going into a dark age? And we have to double and triple down on our commitment to individual creativity towards a future that is radically different and radically better than the past, and realize that the way that this is going to come about is through individual expression, not group action. The scary thing, we live in a world where it's become all about collective morality instead of individual morality, collective agency and group agency instead of you doing something with your ideas, with your time, and holding yourself accountable for maximizing your human greatness. Let there be light. The human spirit triumphs over all. The human spirit triumphs over all. Go, do it, you.
Oh my God. You have lit a fucking fire within me. I can't thank you enough, man. And I know you are lighting this fire for so many people. So many people.
I'm so imperfect, dude. I'm so imperfect and so limited and so flawed, and I have such little power and such, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? That's not my job. My job is to just...
Everything you said. That's your job. That's all of our jobs. And you've lit a fucking fire, man. Truly, truly. What an incredible, incredible way to finish this. We absolutely have to go deeper offline. We absolutely have to have you back on for way more. There's so much to talk about, man. This has been an honor and a pleasure. And I truly, truly thank you for just giving your all to this conversation, to me, to everyone listening, and for giving your all to yourself.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
Very selfish.
So that's that. What a finish. I mean, wow. I wish you could see the video. He had his fists in the air, just passionately, like the fire is just so real, so real. That was mind-blowing. Wow, I'm just still in awe. I just finished recording it and had to record this outro and the intro as well right away. And all I can say is I'm looking forward to the rest of my life more than I ever have after a conversation like that. I am definitely going to have Francis back on the show. Please text me and let me know, what would you like me to talk to Francis about next time? And what was your favorite part of this episode? 619-825-2595. Yeah, let me know what to dig into next time with him. And I'm probably going to go even longer. Because, I mean, who couldn't? It's just, there's so much to talk about with him. And there's so much incredible insights to share. So thank you for listening. Thank you to you, Francis. I appreciate you. And please, guys, make sure to share this episode. It's really important that people hear this conversation, a very different perspective, with everything going on right now, I think this is incredibly, incredibly important to get this voice out there. So please help me and do your part in getting this out there. And if you're new to the show or you haven't yet subscribed, please do subscribe to the show. I'm releasing episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. And leave me a review as well in Apple Podcasts. It helps a lot. Much love to you. Take care of yourselves. Until next time. Peace.